Well, I just did a video on my YouTube channel called Eat Like a Happy Person. And what I said, what in that video, which is that this is not as much about food as it is about our relationship to food. And that's a mind thing, not a body thing. So I know people who eat very healthy diets. I know people who eat healthier diets than I do, and I eat really well. They're less healthy than I am. You want to know why? Because they're stressed about food and they think about food all the time. Their lives are dictated by food, and they have lists of things they can and can't eat, and they can't even barely travel because they're so restrictive in their mindset, right? So it is how we relate to food. And by the way, on a very physiological level, stress weakens digestion. So if you're a highly stressed person, very anxious, not sleeping well, over caffeinated, you can eat a healthy diet and your body's not even going to process it well. So for me, again, I'm always coming, like every time you manage stress, if you're living in a managed stress state, your endurance is better, your weight management is better, your digestion is better, your immune system is better, your mood is better, your gut bacteria is better. All those things are better when you know how to manage your stress.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell, from the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored: the entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that, I can help people, I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. I am here today with Sid Garza-Hillman. Sid, are you there?
I am here. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So glad to have you here. I know we were just chatting before we got on the recording. You're coming in from Northern California, is that right?
Mendocino Coast, little town, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things. I'm a California native myself, and I always giggle with people. They're like, "Oh, you're from California or Northern California." I'm like, they're actually like two separate states.
Oh boy, are they? Yeah, and I grew up in Southern California, and so for years I thought California ended at San Francisco. So that was like later when I realized, oh, there's a whole nother California north of San Francisco even.
Yeah, and it keeps going too. Like it's one of those states you can drive 18 hours and still be in the state.
It's true. And now I'm like north of They go, oh, San Francisco. I go, no, like 4 hours north.
Keep going.
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah.
You're still in Florida. But yeah, I used to go up to that area, Shasta, Trinity, everything all the time. So I really I like that part of the country. And salmon fishing and everything up there. It's completely different than Southern California.
It is completely different.
Very warm and very sunny, and it's rainy and all sorts of other stuff up in Northern California.
Yeah, pretty great. Yeah, pretty great.
So what I want to do before we get too far into this is just go through your bio real quick, so our audience knows who you are, and then we'll just dive into your story. So Sid Hillman is the author of 3 books. Let's see if I can get these titles right: Approaching the Natural, a Health Manifesto; Raising Healthy Parents, Small Steps, Less Stress, and a Thriving Family; and 6 Truths. Live by these truths and be happy. Don't and you won't. So you hold a BA in philosophy from UCLA. You're a public speaker, a podcaster on your podcast, What Sid Thinks. You're a certified nutritionist, a running coach, an oxygen advantage breathing instructor, which I want to hear about that because I've never heard of that before.
Yes.
And founder of Small Steppers. You're a Stanford, Stanford Inn and Resort Wellness Program Director and a race director of the Mendocino Coast 50K Trail Ultra Marathon. 50K is a long ways.
Yeah, well, it's technically 31.4, but my race goes a little bit over, so it's about 34 miles.
That's awesome.
On trails, yeah.
So why don't we start with essentially what you're known for as for your business. Basically, what's your business like? Who do you serve? What do you do for them?
Well, I mean, I guess you could say it's under health and wellness, but it's a very specific approach that came from a series of failures, meaning that I initially started with coaching people nutrition and realized very quickly that they weren't sticking with my recommendations long-term. Not that they didn't agree with them, but they didn't have the tools to continue that. So I backed out. That inspired my first book and also my overall approach, which is Small Steppers, which is first and foremost, a stress management and habit change approach. Under that, I do coach people, as you said, in the bio, nutrition, fitness, and breath work, but it all is in the stress management and habit change umbrella, because without those tools, people will try something and not be able to stick with it. So I first teach them my approach of how to stick with something long enough to make it a habit. Then I teach them the information to then apply that system to.
So why don't you start real quick for me? What is the you go through to help people to stick with something? Because I feel like that's a big win for people.
It's huge. Well, so this is like a long-term, this is like the anti-quick fix thing, right? So the marketing of the quick fix is very powerful. It's very strong. It's why people are drawn to these kinds of things, because it preys, I'm going to say, because it's a sort of a predatory kind of thing, preys on our excitement, our desire for a good life. And it says, well, I can deliver you that with almost no effort and very quickly, but it can't, and it doesn't, and it fails every time. So what I do is my mantra, I hate that word, but it's what it is, over the last few years, is mind first, body second, which means we will get to the discussion of weight loss. We'll get to the discussion of endurance and fitness. We'll get to the discussion of all this stuff. But let's talk about your goals. Are you very clear about what you actually want? Because if people take another 5 seconds, they'll say, well, I don't want to just lose weight. I actually want to be at a healthy weight. Okay, well, that's a different conversation. Because if you just want to lose weight, go on any diet, you'll lose weight. And most diets will deliver weight loss. They just don't deliver it long-term. So in quantifying those goals, like really working with clients for, weeks, writing them, their writing assignments, getting things very clear. What are they actually looking for in their lives? What are their ideals? What are their standards? What are their values? What are their actual goals? Then I will talk about ways to get to those goals, but not until they know exactly what they want first. That's the very opposite of what a diet does. Diet says, don't think about anything. Just do exactly what I tell you. Eat this at this time. Do this exactly this recipe, and you'll lose 10 pounds in 20 days. And like I said, it works. And they get excited, and the dopamine hormone gets flowing, and they're like, this is amazing. Everyone goes, you look so fantastic. 6 months later, they've gained it back almost 100% of times, if not 100% of times.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I worked with a high performance fitness coach for a couple of years, whose target market was entrepreneurs like myself. And one of the first things that he did was that same thing. It's like, what do you actually want out of your health goals?
Yeah.
And like where I came down, what I was like the very specific thing that I'm interested in is like, I've got 4 kids, and my youngest one is 3, and I want to be able to keep up with them hiking when they're 18.
That's right.
Right. which is like I want to be able to take them out and do adventures and stuff with them. I don't want to get old and tired, kind of thing.
That's right.
That makes sense.
How old are you?
I am 36 now.
Yeah. See, I'm 53. And I like the fact that I can run the course that I run it the day before. I like that I can go out and do 34 miles on trails. I like that I can, my twins are 13 now, but they're still young. I play basketball, baseball with my kids. I'm running around. I'm super active. I do value that. And I like the fact that that I'm able to pull off those things. Those are very real values. Those are so much more important than weight loss. I couldn't care about a scale weight. I do like the fact that I'm active at my age, and a lot of guys my age are not active. And they're on a lot of prescription medications. I'm on zero non-prescription medications. I value those things so much that I'm able to do the things that are necessary to keep living this way, to not do short-term bursts.
Yeah. To be able to live life and like have specific, I call them life outcomes, like things that you want to do in your life. And I tell people all the time for like their business too, like, because we do business coaching and other things. And it's like, what do you actually want your business to do for you?
Because if it's just money, then you lose that's probably not what it is actually. If you actually, it's like people go, I want to lose weight. And I go, wait a second, why? Right. So if you coach somebody and they go, well, what do you want with your business? I want to make money. Well, why? Well, because I want more time off with my family. Okay, now we're talking, right? Now that's the real meat of it, and sort of like when it comes to food, like nutrition coaching, this is loaded because people want it with no expenditure. They want their health goals with not giving up anything. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if you understand that you want long-term weight loss, that means sometimes you're going to eat stuff that isn't the best thing ever all the time, every single time you eat. It's not a sacrifice at that point. You're eating something that's super healthy. It tastes good enough. You do that most days. You have treats when you are out with friends or on weekends or something. Pretty simple thing. But man, diets sell you this idea that you don't have to do anything. You can have exactly what you want with no effort, almost no effort put in. And that's just a lie.
Yeah. And like the same thing goes with the growing your business, right? Like one of the things that like we travel full time, and that's really important to me that we can travel and adventure and do those things. So I have like time requirements for like how much time I'm gonna be able to put into my business and how much time I'm gonna do it, and like income things. But like what would you call it? My desire to move to be location independent is one of the higher end things, which puts a lot of restrictions on what I can or can't do from, offering services and products and whatnot in my business. Because like I got a good friend of mine who's like, I'm just so jealous of your business because I built my business. He makes probably 10 times the income I do. He's like, but I'm stuck with like an 8-hour chain to this area.
That's right. Yeah. So you were very clear about what your overall goal was, and that informed your actions on the ground. I apply that same way of thinking to health and happiness. To know your overall goals informs what you do on the ground, which means you're not going to dive in and overwhelm and burn out yourself on a new diet. You're going to hold back because it's important for you to have a long-term health goal. So it informs what you do day to day, which is going to be a lot less than somebody on a diet does. I use this, it's exactly the same approach. I just extrapolated that kind of thing into how I coach people in the fitness world. And health world in general with nutrition and everything else. It's know your goals first, because that will inform what you do on what you do day to day. Yeah, exactly. So you're living that thing. You're not willing to make more money at the expense of the true value of what you want to do, which is to be able to travel around and all the things that you want to do, not sit in an office for 10 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you find out you actually need a lot less money to do the things you want than you originally think when you set out to go do something.
Yeah. Well, no, of course, if you make a bunch of money, what happens? You start spending more money. Yeah. Then you have to make that amount of money to keep going, right? That's the thing that we've all kind of gotten into. Like more income, I can afford this and this, and then I'm sort of locked into that income. So I'm grappling with those things myself and trying to and it's an ongoing work, right? It's an ongoing focus on what are your goals. And so with clients, I'm constantly remind, even when we get into the minutia of, okay, well, now you know how to do the approach. Let's start, adjusting your diet, let's say. But every few days I go, let's remember your goals. Go back and read what you wrote about what you want in your life, because you're getting all excited about food now. I go, hold on a second, wait, don't take on so much, because your goal isn't short-term weight loss. And so it's always like a bounce back to when they were calm and in their kind of good place when they wrote those things. I go back, because that's who you are. Revisit that every now and then.
Yeah. It was interesting when I started my my health journey. It was actually not weight loss; it was weight gain, because I was always the scrawny kid.
Sure.
I could never put on weight. And my health coach, one of the first things we did was we went through a genetic testing thing, and discovered like whatever the gene is that gives you like a hunger and satiety response. I don't have, mine is not activated, so I don't really experience hunger the way most people do, and I don't really feel full when I finish food. And he's like, there's generally two responses to that gene flip, and one of them is you overeat because you don't have the full thing, or the other one is you undereat. He's like, it's more uncommon in America to undereat. He's like, but that's sort of where you're at. Yeah. And so he had me do a food log for a couple of months essentially. And he was like, yeah, my average calorie intake on a daily basis was like 1,200 to 1,400 calories, despite being active and doing all these things. He's like, that's why you can't gain weight. You're not eating enough.
Yeah. That happens to people just in general. Yeah.
So I had to retrain myself on like how much food is actually like the right amount of food to eat to actually, gain weight. And then after we made those adjustments, actually doing the workout stuff like that, I was able to put on like 10 pounds of muscle in like 3 or 4 months.
Nice. Huge.
After 20 years of not being able to put on any weight at all.
I get it. Yeah. The body tells you things, and even without a genetic test, you can use those markers of, am I gaining weight? Am I putting, if I'm weightlifting and not increasing my ability over time, something isn't adding up. Probably you're undernourished, so those are ways that I can look at it even without a blood test,
Yeah. I just thought it was fascinating because he was like, it was just one of the first things he identified. And I was like, that's really interesting when you start looking at the data that your body is giving you.
Yeah.
So you can learn a lot and make adjustments, and it's not hard really if you just make simple changes.
Yes, hence small steppers. That's my whole benchmark of my entire approach, which is, making little changes and kind of guiding the ship in a very, looking at everything kind of way, and making micro adjustments along the way, always improving along the way, not pushing too hard in one area that you end up burning out and doing nothing.
Yeah. It's interesting. I said I definitely had a different health coach than you, but he had a similar approach, because he was like, we're not going to do all these things. We're going to do one thing. He's like, we're going to do a food log.
So
right. And it was like, okay, now we've done a food log. Let's try adding one extra meal.
Yep.
Right.
There you go.
And that was it.
Yeah. Because it works, and so guys like that and myself are battling the People magazine before and after photo, The P90X, DVD. Those are great, but they're like 10 minutes a day. Have you ever done one of those DVDs?
I have. I actually went through the P90X program when my wife was pregnant with our first
so
baby.
so would you say it's a very easy 10 minutes?
No.
It's a nightmare, right? So it's like it sounds great 10 minutes, but that is a brutal 10 minutes. Like I do some high intensity interval training, and it's like 15 minutes. And I go, it's only 15 minutes, but boy, is that a slow 15 minutes. Like you are in deep, and so that's enough.
I remember really specifically doing the yoga on the P90X thing. And I was like, yoga, it's yoga, right? Yoga,
yeah. Gotta be easy. Yeah.
It's gotta be easy. And we did the first yoga thing and we only made it halfway through the routine
before we
were like on the floor, like, I can't do this.
That's right. Yeah. I have a treadmill and it has this like iFit like it's got a Nordic track. It has like, those programs and videos and everything. One was like an 18-minute hike. And I was like, you know what? I'll do an 18-minute hike today. It was to this day, the hardest workout I've ever done on that machine. I was dying. I had to stop like every 3 minutes, stop the machine, pause it, sit down, and get back on because it was like incline of this the whole way, 18 minutes, right? So something that we're sold like it's only 10 minutes. Well, that can be enough if somebody doesn't have the proper sort of mindset around it and everything else to just people won't make it through.
Yeah. And then like, Tony Horton's famous for his like plyometric push-ups where he's done, he can like jump off the ground with his push-ups, all 4 limbs. And he's like, we're going to do some push-ups. And then he gets on the ground and he does push-ups and his whole body comes off the ground. And I'm like,
different push-up than I thought. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that was like it's a little more intense than what I'm used to.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit then about your origin story, how you got into this business of helping people take small steps with their health. And just every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them into the hero they are today. And I want to hear that story. Were you, bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into health coaching, or did you start in a job and eventually become an entrepreneur? Basically, how did you get here?
I was bit by a vegan. No, that's a total joke. Anyways, which was not vegan for them to do that to me. So interesting origin story, which is I got out of UCLA with one goal in mind, which was to be an indie rock musician.
Well, that's a good goal.
Yeah, so that was my goal. That was my big goal. Indie rock musician. I took a job at UCLA in the audiovisual department with a bunch of other misfits, actors and writers and musicians, and it was this motley crew of people trying to do other things. And in my pursuit of music, playing gigs at night, I then, from a weird chain of events, landed an agent to act, and I started making a living as an actor. So I quit that job and became a full-time actor in Los Angeles for years. And so it's a completely different thing than I do now. But here was the through line. I was a lifetime and lifelong asthmatic with a lot of allergies. So when I was about 22, just out of college, I was given a book and I read it. It was about nutrition. I'd never read a nutrition book in my life, had no interest in it at all, but it made a correlation between dairy and asthma. I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense because dairy's like in your stomach and asthma's in your lungs. There's no whatever. But on a lark, I gave up dairy for a month just to see what it was like. And my asthma went away for the first time in 22 years. No medication.
That's amazing.
That was, yeah. And my allergies almost entirely gone. So that was my first foray into diet and nutrition and like, whoa. And as a singer, I really dug that a lot. I liked, again, it was already an attachment to the quality of life. It wasn't about a weight loss thing or even anything minutiae. It was like, oh, wait, this makes my life better. So there wasn't a restrictive aspect of it. I hear all the time, I could never give up cheese. Well, it wasn't a big deal for me because my life got way better for doing it. So for years then, I was playing music and doing acting and the whole thing, but started reading nutrition book after nutrition book just because it was like, this is so fascinating. My diet evolved and I started getting in better shape, and then I would make mistakes and I, and it just learning. Finally, Los Angeles burnt me and my wife out. We were there for 20 years. My wife also went to UCLA. We stayed in Los Angeles after we graduated and just sort of hung out there and worked like we did. But it eventually took our toll. We had a 19-month-old. Our first daughter was born at that time in Los Angeles. And we realized I probably me more than my wife. She was ready to go, but I was really ready to go. My band, I'd stopped playing in LA because I didn't like the club scene there. I had already been on tour in Europe and got spoiled by not playing in Los Angeles. And I just said, you know what, can we get out of here? And she was like, I don't know, but let's start looking around. And we found this little town and we moved up, and it was like a 5-day turnaround from the moment I stepped foot in this town to the 5 days later when we put an offer on a house and put our house up for sale in Los Angeles was 6 days total.
Nice.
And we relocated up here. Once we got up here, we sat on the counter of our kitchen and went, what the hell did we just do? Because we were really not planned in a sort of substantial way. But there was this resort set 10 minutes, 12 minutes away, 11, 13 minutes away, called the Stanford Inn. So I go down, I go, let me get a serving bartending job. Because we're literally like, we were doing my wife's a designer. We were doing some letterpress printing, like just kind of trying to figure out. And my plan was I'd go down to LA every now and then and audition for work. And I'd call my agent and I go, okay, I'm coming down. He'd go, don't bother, don't come. I go, why? There's nothing going on. You left at a really good time, but it's dry. There's nothing going on. It just kept doing that. So I never went back down. So I was like, I got to figure out something to do here. So I started working at the Stanford Inn, but still with my nutrition thing going on. So I, within a year, said to the owners, Joan and Jeff Stanford, I said, if I go back to school and get a certification in nutrition, can I teach here? And they said, absolutely. So I went back to school, 1.5-year program. My twins were then born in 2009. I was in school, became certified as a nutritionist, started teaching at the resort, working with clients on the side. And the rest is really history, because at that point, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, the failure of teaching people a nutritional approach, which I still stand by today, but that they weren't sticking with, made me back out, inspired me to write my first book, inspired me to launch my first podcast, which is different from the one I do now, but and begin working and speaking all over the country. It opened up a whole new thing for me, which was, oh, this is not about food. This is about stress and habit change. Oh, okay. Now we can apply that to food, et cetera, et cetera. So that really was the inspiration for the work I do now and my 3 books that I've had published and a 4th one on the way.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can feel you on the whole 6 days thing. Our decision to move into an RV and travel around the country 5 years ago was inspired by our landlord. You know, he came in one week and he's like, I'll bring you the contract to re-sign the lease at the end of the week. So, you know, because the year lease is up and we got to just re-sign the contract. And he comes back the next week and he goes, so the property owner decided to sell. I can't re-sign the lease for you.
Whoa.
And he's like they're supposed to give you like 60 days when you have kids and whatnot, and it was like 35.
Whoa.
I was like, so I could have been a butt about it if I wanted to, but I was like, my wife and I just looked at each other and we're like, how about we take that RV trip we've been talking about instead of trying to find another place?
Unbelievable.
And in 28 days we drove 1,500 miles to look at 3 different RVs. We bought one of them. Our friends bought another one. We brought that back home. And the remaining 14 days, I renovated that RV. My wife sold everything we owned and took care of the house. And then we moved into the RV on day 28 and haven't looked back.
Unbelievable.
So we've been traveling since.
Unbelievable. God, that is so cool.
That moment when, you know, we were, when we pulled out of the RV for the first time, we sat there and like, what the hell did we just do?
Oh yeah, that moment. Same moment, right? It's just like, what the, such a huge change, right? But it's like you prefer that to, you know, being in your 80s and going, I never did that. You know, like for me, I just go, we sat on the counter and we were like, what do we do? What did we do? You know, it was like our friends were all in LA. Like and they thought we were crazy. We're like, we're moving to Mendocino. They're like, first of all, they're like, where? You know, and second of all, they're like, why you're moving? You're like,
people in LA are only aware of LA.
That's right. Oh no, and we were too. I mean, we didn't even know until we started looking around, right? And it was like, then we went, this whole thing opened up of like these little towns, and I was like, oh my God, we could live in like a little town. That's great, you know. And so, the rest is history. And the crazy thing is, we've been up here for 16 years, which is approaching how long we were in LA, you know. So it's like I feel like we just moved up here, but we've been here almost as long as we were in LA.
Yeah. And then you said your youngest was born in 2009.
The youngest was born in 2000. The twins were born in 2009. My youngest was born in 2004. So we moved. So she was in 2004. We moved up here in 2006. So in the beginning of 2006. So my oldest daughter was about 19 months old when we moved up here, and then 3 years later, my twins were 4 years later. My twins were born.
Yeah. So your youngest and my oldest are the same age.
Right.
So they that's fun. But
yeah.
So you ended up getting into the space where you were teaching. Where does the breath work come in?
Pretty recently, within the last couple of years, actually. So I'm always looking into things. I'm always researching whatever is happening in the health and fitness world. I'm a longtime practitioner of cold therapy, for instance. I've been doing that 4 years every day, literally every day. I think I missed one single day in the last over 4 years.
I've done it a couple times. I hate it. I should
Yeah,
do it more, but I
everybody
hate
hates it. Everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. It's what it is. I hate it. I've joked about this on my videos. I 100% dreaded it every single time. But every time I get out, I go, I'm glad I did that. It's a weird game my brain plays. I go, I do not want to do this. I do it and I get out. But so my first foray into breathwork really was because of cold therapy. So that was about, actually it's 5 years. I just
like
had
the
my
same kind of stuff that like Wim Hof teaches.
No, it really is. So I did his 10-week program in 2017. Okay. So I'm actually realized I just hit the 5-year anniversary on July 15th. So I've been doing it 5 years every single day with the exception of one single day. So in 2017, I do his 10-week course on a lark. I go, that's kind of cool. I've been practicing that breath work every day, like I said, and getting in the cold shower. Now I have a cold tub that stays at 39 degrees on my deck outside. Yeah, and in the winter, in the winter, it's something interesting because more than a few days. This winter, it would be like 39 degrees outside. So I walk outside, it's 39 degrees, and I get in a 39-degree tub. It's like as cold as it is outside. Anyways, so that was my first foray into breathwork. The Wim Hof breathwork thing is, I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's very much of like you do it for 20 minutes. It's not how you breathe regularly. It's just an exercise you do.
Yeah,
and
I've actually done a little bit of it.
There you go. So it's, and you hold the exhale okay, so that's a whole thing. But in my research into breathwork in general, I stumbled upon something called a program called the Oxygen Advantage, run by a guy named Patrick McKeown. He was mentioned and cited in the book Breath by James Nestor, which is a great book if you haven't read it. He's a journalist and he kind of looks into all these different kinds of breath modalities, and Oxygen Advantage is one of them. It piqued my interest for a number of reasons: anxiety, stress, but also increased endurance. So as a running coach, I was like, okay, if there's a move into or an influence in the fitness realm, I'm game. Let me check this out. So I went through his certification training and I love it. So I'm not a Wim Hof practitioner. Again, I took the 10-week course, but I'm not a certified coach in that. So I don't coach anybody, but I am in Oxygen Advantage. So I do breathwork classes at the resort. And I also teach clients breathwork that are in my small steps program. I do separate breath coaching. It's different from Wim Hof in the sense that Oxygen Advantage is geared toward training people how to breathe functionally most of the time. Whereas Wim Hof is like, you do this for 20 minutes and you're done for the rest of the day. Oxygen Advantage is very much geared toward training your body or retraining. As it's not a new way to breathe. It's like, let's get back to the old way when we were breathing slower and lighter and not over breathing because of stress in the modern world. So it's very much of a certain exercises that allow people to learn how to functionally breathe again. And it's been incredible. I mean, so incredible that with my clients, I am getting into the breath work before nutrition, which for years it was like, okay, small steps, stress management. Okay, now let's talk about food. Now it's small steps, stress management. Let's talk about breathing. Then we talk about food. So it's actually taken the pole position in my coaching program.
So just out of curiosity, how does that discussion go over generally with clients that you're like, hey, we're going to start with your breathing when they have goals like I want to be fit when I'm 60?
Yeah, well, because before they get to do the program with me, I have a 15-minute phone call with them, Zoom call, where I say, this may not be your bag, and here's why. Because I'm not going to talk about food for 4 weeks. Because you have done 10 yo-yo diets already, and you're coming to me at least to broach the subject of maybe doing things different. So here's what I tell them right away. I go, listen, if you don't want to push the food discussion down the road by 4 to 6 weeks, you are not ready yet. You got to go and do another 10 more diets and realize they don't work. Then we'll come back and do the hard work. So what I tell people very plain, I'm like, listen, unless you're crawling to the finish here, unless you're like, I don't want to do this ever again, I want to do it differently, I go, okay, good, now we can get the work done. If you're like, well, I kind of like this, but my friend, I go do the diet, go do 5 more diets. They don't work, but if you get it out of your system, then come back to me. So by the time I'm working with them in my 12-week system, me broaching breathwork is the zeroest surprise, if that's a word. The zeroest surprise. Zeroest surprise. There's no surprise. They go, of course, because they know that I'm about stress management and making this long term. That's what I keep reinforcing that. And anytime they go, but I want to talk about food, I go, we're not there yet. I've actually, with clients, I've said, if they kind of bring it up, I go, we can put this work on hold if you got to go do 10 more diets. So we can stop right now and you may never have to come back. And then they go, okay. because they know it doesn't. They've already done that, right? They know. But I'm like, you've seen this movie before. Let's do it differently.
You know
this
how
time.
it ends.
You know how it ends. But we always think, but that diet's different. I've worked with people who have had gastric bypass surgery, lost tons of weight. Guess what? Gained it all back. You want to know why? Because they don't have the tools to make lifelong and real changes. And I don't care, a surgery ain't going to cover you if you haven't dealt with the underlying issues of why you were overeating in the first place, right? So that's the work.
Yeah. And it's like one of the things I've learned over the years is that what you eat certainly matters, but it matters less than how like ready your body is for food.
Well, I just did a video on my YouTube channel called Eat Like a Happy Person. And what I said, what in that video, which is that this is not as much about food as it is about our relationship to food. And that's a mind thing, not a body thing. So I know people who eat very healthy diets. I know people who eat healthier diets than I do, and I eat really well. They're less healthy than I am. You want to know why? Because they're stressed about food and they think about food all the time. Their lives are dictated by food, and they have lists of things they can and can't eat, and they can't even barely travel because they're so restrictive in their mindset, right? So it is how we relate to food. And by the way, on a very physiological level, stress weakens digestion. So if you're a highly stressed person, very anxious, not sleeping well, over caffeinated, you can eat a healthy diet and your body's not even going to process it well. So for me, again, I'm always coming, like, every time you manage stress, if you're living in a managed stress state, your endurance is better, your weight management is better, your digestion is better, your immune system is better, your mood is better, your gut bacteria is better. All those things are better when you know how to manage your stress. Now, within that umbrella, sure, eating well is phenomenal. It's phenomenal, but it is not the only thing.
Yeah.
And so,
it was one of the things that just blew me away when I started learning about it myself with my health coach, because he was like, we worked on body toxicity, we worked on body parasites, we worked on the volume of food that you're eating, we worked on mind, like how your mind interacts with food, and we worked on sleep. We spent a lot of time working on sleep and getting to the point, because I started a long time falling asleep, like at night, and getting a good full 8 hours of sleep. And it's like, and it was probably a year of working with him before we even got to food.
See, that's the
or
same.
Working out.
Yeah.
It was like, there was no working out, no food. It was all these other things.
Right. But he'd be smarter and I'd be smarter if I just said, hey, Richard, I can gain you 10 pounds of pure muscle in 12 weeks if you just do exactly my gym workout, and you'd buy that. More people will buy that. But if you take a year to get into the actual doing of it, he's got a long view mindset just like I do. But that's few and far between. That is not what sells. I'm not a hugely successful practitioner. I don't have millions of followers. I don't even have thousands of followers. And the reason is because my stuff is not sexy.
Stuff that works.
Yeah, I do the stuff that works. It's not sexy. I always joke. I go, this is not the sexy work. This is the real work. So most of my clients are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. You want to know why? Because they've already gotten that crap out of their system, because they're already like, okay, we're good. We're done. I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I don't want to talk about food anymore. I go, good. Now we can get the real work done.
Yeah, and then we did a whole thing on for several months on hormones and testosterone, and like got before and after like testosterone stuff done, and red light therapy and some nutritional things that were all geared towards your hormones. He's like, because he's like, unless your body is like in the right spot, it almost doesn't matter what you eat or what workouts you do. It's not going to get you the result you want.
Yeah. I mean, those things have very real results. There's no doubt about that, but you do have to have your mind and body in a place. I just call it low in a managed stress state, but people can call it different things, but that's essentially what's happening. Yeah. Your hormones are balanced in a managed stress state. It's like all those things go wonky when we're too stressed or under stressed, right? Yeah. If you're too stagnant, you're sitting on a couch all day, that's going to be damaging. But if you're beating yourself up in a gym all day, that's stress. And that doesn't mean you can eat whatever you want. Oh, I work out all day, I can eat whatever I want. I go, that's absolutely not true physiologically. The more workout you do in the gym, the more stress on your body, the more your body needs proper nutrition to support its recovery from that workout, right? So it's you can't just go, I just work out all the time, I'm fine. No, doesn't mean you're healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been one of the more fascinating journeys I've been on in my life, is learning how my body works.
Yeah.
And learning how it relates to all these things. Because I grew up thinking it's, you work out to take care of the calories that you ate, right? Like that. That's right. That was like the only thing that you learn.
That's right.
And it was like the basics that you learn in like school and other things is like, you know, if you eat more than you use, you'll gain weight. If you eat less than you use, then you'll lose weight. And that's like the only thing you ever learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
calories
like,
in, calories out. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't talk about health, and that doesn't talk about the body's response to food, and it doesn't talk about how the body's ability to assimilate and utilize food and digest food, all those kinds of things. It's a little more intricate than such a
and
simple
rest and hormones and like the way that your like the health of your actual like digestive system, how it has to function properly. Because
that's right.
You know, if you know, you got the beginnings of IBS or whatever, you're not going to digest anything.
Yeah, I've worked with people who are eating like pretty darn good diets, but they've had diarrhea for 2 years. You know, I go, so what's happening if you're eating a really good diet and you can't even digest it, and your gut and your digestive system is a shambles? You got to deal with that first. Then we can talk about the food later. Right?
Yeah. And I think probably one of the most poignant things my health coach ever said to me was, he was like, your trajectory can either be downwards or it can be upwards as you age. And he's like, there's no reason why it has to be downwards.
I know.
Like, he's like, you can continue to get healthier and healthier and healthier until you die.
You know, I direct that ultra marathon every year. It's been its 5th year. Every year I have at least 10 over 60s and at least 3 to 4 over 70s running my race. It is a 34-mile trail race with 5,000 feet of elevation. And this last year in April, 72-year-old woman comes across and she goes like, that's great. She goes trouncing off, 72 years old. So you tell me, oh, it's just because I'm old now. That's what happens. Oh, really? Ask the 72-year-old, the 70-year-olds that crossed my finish line. You know, I've run it for 5 years. I had to put 2 years on hold for COVID, but I just had its 5th year. Every year I've had over 70s run it, and they come through like great. That's my goal. I don't care about winning a race at 53. I want to be running a race at 72. So that means my choices as a 53-year-old man right now are dictated by that long-term goal, which means I'm not pushing myself in any one area right now to burn out. So I'm injured and I can't do anything when I'm 72. I do a lot less now so that I can still do stuff at 72. It changes.
Yeah. It always reminds me of that story. What was Jack LaLanne was like, what, 96 when he swam the English Channel?
Unbelievable. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So there's no reason to get unhealthier just because you're aging.
No, it's a low bar. People go, oh, so what happens? I go, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have to happen that way. I'm sorry. You know, they just want to like use it as an excuse of why. And it's like, well, wait a second. You're not like really looking at you're, 50 pounds overweight. That's why. And that's not because you're older. That's because you aren't taking care of yourself. So you can just cast it off and not take responsibility, or you can do the hard work of saying, I got to get my crap together.
So I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about your superpowers in your business, right? Every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's their fancy flying suit made by their genius intellect or the ability to call down thunder from the sky. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over the course of your career that really sets you apart and allows you to help your people slay their villains and come out on top of their journeys. And the way I like to frame it is your superpower is probably that skill that if you look at everything you've developed over your career, it's the one thing that keeps coming up, that ties everything together, right? And with that sort of framing, what do you think your superpower is?
That's a tough question for me. I would say something in the line of the way that I empathize with people, the way that I bring a sense of humor and a levity to very heavy subjects. Even my music, I've always been kind of an under the radar guy. I don't think that's like the worst superpower in the world, being I'm under the radar guy. I'm not mainstream, and so who I appeal to are people who I really appeal to, even musically. I had core people who loved my music, but just not very many of them, and that's kind of where I've translated into my books now. I have people who are fierce. They really love what I do, my podcast, but there's just not that many of them. So there's I do have a good ability to empathize with people. I have been through it. I'm in it. I'm in my struggles. The same as my clients. I think I figured out a good way to manage those struggles and be successful with those. And so therefore I'm effective in when I do teach people. So I would say empathy and levity and humor are probably the three things that I do best.
Yeah. Empathy is a powerful superpower, right? The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see life through their eyes.
Yeah.
It's a copywriter skill if you're on the business side, but it's also, it's probably one of the most essential skills if you want to help someone be able to change their actions.
That's right. Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, honestly, like I would say, I always say over half my job is trying to live the example. of my work, you know, trying to be this guy. And therefore I am in the struggle always. I've had every client of mine is completely different than I am on paper, but totally the same when you have a 5-minute conversation with them. I mean, the same temptations, the same cravings, the same trouble with sticking with things, the same ups and downs, the same, all those things that brought me here are the same things that are bringing them here too. And I think and I do, by the way, that's my parenting style too. You know, I want to make sure my kids see that I'm nervous, that I'm afraid when I'm afraid. I do not want them to think the untruth, which is that I'm somehow got it all figured out, because I don't. The question is, what do I do when I don't have it figured out? What do I do when I'm afraid of something? How do I behave when I make a mistake? Those are the things that I want my children to see. And those are the things that I use to inform my clients. Here's how I have made mistakes. Here's how I have done, you know, the work to get around those things and to improve my life as a result of those mistakes. That's what I think is what makes my work effective.
Yeah. We do the same thing with our kids. We let them see everything.
Yeah.
And
Arguing.
see our struggles, see our arguing.
Yeah,
And even when my wife and I argue, which doesn't happen often, because, you know, we're pretty good at this whole thing now. But
yeah,
when we do, it's like we'll bring it up with the kids, be like, hey, here's what we're arguing about, here's
yeah,
why, here's what our struggle with it, and here's where our miscommunication was and
yeah.
why it started, and what could we do better next time, and we talk about it.
And they get to see it resolved.
Yeah,
you know, because
resolved.
for you to hide that argument means your kids grow up in it thinking that arguing is somehow bad or that it's an unhealthy relationship to argue. I've been married 27 years. Do you think that I can get, you know, if I'm not arguing with my wife, I'm not communicating with my wife. I mean, you can't live in a house and not argue with people. People get tired, they get irritable, they have miscommunication. It's what we do. But what do you do when that happens? That's what defines somebody. That is the character of somebody. Not that they don't make mistakes, because we're not robots. What happens when we do make mistakes? What do we do? How do we handle those things? That's what defines the character of somebody. That's what I want my kids to see. I don't want them to go, my dad never made mistakes. I want them to go, when my dad made mistakes, here's what he did. When my mom screwed up, here's what she did. That's real stuff. Right. And that, by the way,
when you screw up, or
go ahead.
I say when you screw up, or like when you know, to put it mildly, when the shit hits the fan for circumstances, right? When things blow up or things don't work out the way that you want them to,
yeah,
how do you handle those responses, and not just hide all the struggles from your kids, but just let them see, like, hey, here's how we deal with these kind of things.
Well, and what's interesting, what you just said, and by the way, you swore first, just for the record. But I extrapolate that same thing to my work. I just did a podcast episode called At All Other Times, because the same thing holds true with food. I have clients who overeat at one meal and they just beat themselves up. Oh my gosh, I have no control. And I go, what did you do during the day? Well, I had fresh fruit. And I go, so you had a really good day, didn't you? You know, so we are super focused on these mistakes, and we are trained, many of us from youth, from our childhoods, to focus on the one mistake as if it's a statement of who we are as a person. And I go, I'm not even a huge sports fan, but I always use the game tapes analogy. I go, let's go look at the game tapes, right? What you do is you analyze. You don't look at the mistake and go, I'm a bad person, I'm weak. You go, okay, made a mistake. Okay, let me look at that. Let me look at the circumstances. What could I have done differently? Let me learn from that mistake. If there's a few key items that I teach my clients, that's one of the biggest, which is, don't use overeating or eating food that you didn't really want in the moment because you just whatever. Don't waste that opportunity. That's an amazing opportunity to look at, what was your stress level? Have you not been sleeping well? How's your stress level in general? Did you just get off a bad day at work? What could you have done differently at work to maybe come home and not be such in a bad mood? There's all these kinds of things that I've applied, again, to myself, that people can use when they make that so-called mistake. But we don't. We just go, I can't do it. It's like, oh yes, you can. We're not robots, you know?
Yeah. Or like when you sort of have everything else lined up and you're doing your health and lifestyle the way that you want, sometimes you're just at a party with friends and, you know, you overeat. It's not a big deal. Like, it's not going to throw you off the train.
And not only that, that's the time to overeat.
Yeah.
See, so this is what I tell clients. That's what I tell clients. I like, people make fun of me at parties, like, "Why do you eat so much?" I go, "Yeah, because I'm at a party. I don't do this all the time. That's why I'm thin, right?" So it's like, that's why I'm in good shape. But like, that's the time to. I'm not kidding, Richard. I've had clients where I say, "Listen, I need you to eat junk food on Saturday night," and I do that because they are holding on so tight. They have been trained to do this idea of perfection, and it's always made them quit. And they try to pull that with me, and I go, "What did it? You're holding on too tight. you think you can't make a so-called mistake, which means you're thinking about food more than anything else in your life and you have other things going on. So on Saturday, I want you to consciously and intentionally have some junk food, and I want you to enjoy the crap out of it, and I want you to really have fun with it. That way you get up on Sunday, you have no regrets about it. You go, I'm really glad I did that. That's happy living. That's healthy living, right?
That's one of the things my wife and I do. So like we cook everything from scratch. My wife is a fantastic chef. I'm pretty good myself. We like to cook. Our kids are learning how to cook. My son he can grocery shop and make an entire meal for himself, including like for a whole group of people. He makes a stuffed shells ricotta thing, and he actually makes the ricotta from scratch.
Oh my God.
Amazing. It's amazing. So like, you know, they know, like my kids know how to bake bread from scratch. They know how to bake noodles and stuff like from scratch. So that like we eat well.
Yeah.
But on Friday nights, we go out to the grocery store and we buy a bunch of junk food and we watch movies and we have a great time.
That we do that on week. We do that Saturday night. Saturday nights are our junk food kind of, you know, and again, it's like junk food a little bit better than most people, but still, but it's movie night, right? And it's like, that's when you do that. So I teach a very much of a time and place mentality, because again, I don't really know the reasons, except for I think it's probably marketing and, you know, commercialism of health or whatever it is. But I think people have this idea that, well, I'll put it this way. If you learn about healthy eating and you don't have the proper mental context, you will then translate that into, I can never eat anything but this healthy food. And as soon as you make that jump, and it's not conscious, by the way, it's just, you don't have the proper context. As soon as you make that jump, you're raising your stress. That's true. I have people who go, I've been to this person's retreat 7 times a year, and their level of stress is insane. They're so deep in the weeds on one part of their lives, which is food, that they're missing the entirety of a great life, which is travel and family and seeing things, and it's all gone because they have a very, too restrictive.
It's one of the things that has really surprised me. And it's like we my wife and I, when we got married 13 years ago, we were broke, right? Like we just had no money.
Yeah.
And so like learning to cook for us was like a necessity skill.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point where like we didn't just like learn to cook, we learned to love to cook. And like now we love making food from scratch. And like for the most part, we don't even go to restaurants unless we're in like some place. Like we travel a lot. So when we're in cool places, we'll go to like the cool restaurant that's there or whatever. Right. But like whatever the locals like, you need to check this place out, we'll go eat there. Right. But I don't know, probably 7-8 times out of 10, we can make the same meal better at home because we're skilled in that area.
Correct.
And so, but we also, we pretty much can eat whatever we want because we're making whole real food.
Yeah.
And then like, we'll go visit family or go visit friends who are sort of in the whole processed boxed food, like lifestyle. And like, we'll spend a couple of days with them. And by the end of the couple of days, we're like feeling terrible.
Oh yeah. It takes its toll, especially when you eat well most of the time. Quickly. When you have that stuff, you can really, people who eat that stuff all the time just kind of always feel that way. But if you're eating well most of the time and then you have that, you go, whoa, it doesn't feel good.
Feel it, and it doesn't feel great. Yeah. And so people are like, how are you so fit and healthy when you eat whatever you want? And I'm like, mostly because we cook real food.
Yeah, we eat, because what we eat most days, what we really want most days is not this. It's not restrictive. It's that we like eating this way most of the time,
Yeah. So we like good food. And when you get good at it, it's like, we're not suffering. Like people come to our food bar and we cook for them and they're like, holy crap. And I'm like, we eat this way every day.
Yeah.
And it's not hard. Yeah. And it costs less.
People think that all those perceptions, that's why I teach at the resort. I teach cooking classes, nutrition classes with this in mind. It is not hard to do. It's not harder to do. It's very easy to do. But they come in the door thinking, okay, I'll try it. But man, oh man. And it's not. Once you take time, guess what? Hang with it long enough, it becomes normal. You guys don't go, what do we do? You've just been doing this a long time. So have I. I don't think about food every day. I don't measure, count, and weigh anything, right? Yeah. People think you have to, but you don't. You absolutely, not only that, it's good not to, because it's exhausting to be at that level.
I had to go through because I was not eating enough. I had to go through and like actually log my food for a little while just so I could get an idea of like how much food is actually the right amount. But after that, I was like, now that I sort of know that, I don't really care anymore.
Me too. Yeah. If I feel fatigued, or if I'm not like, if my strength training isn't like improving, I go, I probably got to eat a little more. It's like, it's not that I'm not at a calculator. I go, and I just, if I put on a little extra fat on my midsection, I go, I should probably eat a little less or eat a little better, because I've been stressed and I kind of, and so it's like, it's a little tweak.
And then one of the things that I think is really telling about that is you're active, like you're doing things in your life. Yeah. And your performance changes and you can tell, like, and I noticed that too. It's like, if I can't keep up with my kids when we're swimming in the lake or rollerblading or scooting around or whatever the hell we're doing, because we're doing all sorts of stuff. We hike all the time. And I was like, we get to the end of the hike and I'm exhausted more than I feel like. I'm like, I probably didn't eat enough.
That's right. Or you're not sleeping well, or, like there's all those kinds of things, right? So you can kind of look at it and go, oh, that's interesting, and let me go to the game tapes, right? And then you sort of look at those things and make little tweaks and you're back on track.
Yeah. Or like I just had a client that we're no longer working together, and I realized like that client and I had it was a negative energy relationship. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I could feel it.
Totally. Yep.
And removing them is like immediately like changes your energy level.
Correct. And that energy level translates into other actions that you're doing, right? So if you don't identify that, you're going to keep that there because you won't question that. And then it's going to affect how you eat, how you sleep, and how you exercise and all those kinds of things. So it is my core strategy of my whole approach. It's called awareness-based habit change. So first and foremost, I'm teaching people an awareness about the actions that they're doing. So they can identify dread, they can identify stress, they can identify stagnancy, they can identify when they're just not liking something. So I'm not shoving the whole bunch of stuff for them to do so that they're distracted from their own questioning of how am I feeling around this. So in your awareness, you're like, this client is not serving me and it's affecting everything else. That's the best place to be, because then you have the ability to remove that source. But if you think that's about what you're eating, it's actually about the client, and that, so it's asking those questions of what is actually at stake.
I call those things psychological barriers to success, or psychological encouragements to action.
Perfect.
And simple things, right? So like as an example, I have a water flosser I use because I don't like the actual flossing, so I have a water flosser thing. And if I put it on my sink next to, in the bathroom, like on the sink, I forget to use it all the time, just never. But if I move it 3 feet to the right into the shower,
then you notice it.
I use it every day. That's right. Like it's like simple environmental things that you can just.
I have with clients, what I do with clients, one of my strategies, my tools is that I have them use like little Post-it notes. And I go, where do you go every morning without thinking about it? And they go, I go to my coffee pot. I go, good, put a Post-it note on there that says do 5 squats. Because and then when they get used to that, I go, now move the Post-it note over to something else, right? And it's this, to break into our normal routines, we have to keep things changing a little bit. We have to keep an alive environment, just like you did, like moving that thing. You walk in and go, where's my day? Oh, that's it. Oh, I'll use it. And it's just enough to keep you awake. But boy, how quickly we can settle into our routines and not pay attention. I had a client one time, she goes, Sid, I had a kid and I literally opened my eyes 3 years later. And her weight had gone up, and her stress had gone up, and her health had gone down. She was like 3 years. She just was asleep at the wheel for 3 years, just doing the business of her life and not paying attention to anything. And she was over it. And she was a great client. I still am in touch with her because years later, she's still using my approach because she never wants that to happen again. She wants to be at a place of awareness so that never happens again.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how impactful just being aware. I love the analogy of the game tapes. Because that's it. That's sort of the way I operate now. Is when I'm like, I'm not feeling it, I can look around. That's how I can identify like, hey, it's the client that's causing that negative energy,
exactly right,
or whatever it is. Right? It's not always the client. Sometimes it's something else. It's the air conditioner's not working the way I want, or whatever. Like there's something that's causing the stress,
just nagging you. Yeah, no, totally. And you're not aware of it. And you're going about your day, and you're a little bit irritable. And instead of going, I guess I'm just a jerk dad, you go, why am I irritable right now? Something's not right. Let me figure that out. Let me go to the game tapes and analyze and see what's happening, right? And that is super effective.
Why is it that when my son or daughter did this thing, I flipped out on them instead of having like a normal response, right?
That's my second book, Raising Healthy Parents. The message there is parents have got to embody their own be the example, but also have tools to manage their own stress. Same approach that I do, but I applied it to parents because parents often put themselves on hold, so-called for the good of the kids, but it's never good for the kids when the parents are not feeling good.
That's one of the things I tell my son all the time, because he's got all these things he wants to do, and they're great things, and we encourage him and help him do as much as he can. But like one of the things that I've wanted to do my whole life was take my family traveling and go on adventures and other things. He wants to do falconry, and falconry is cool. And you can start falconry at like 13, which he's going to be 13 in a couple of months. And I was like, but you have to be in a specific spot for several years to do that.
Otherwise, that's a loud RV.
Yeah, otherwise it's a loud RV. And I've like, this is just one example, but it happens a lot. And I've told him a number of times. I was like, listen, one of the things I'm showing you is I'm showing you what it looks like to take control of your life. And this
Well
is one of
done.
the things I want to do, right? So we're doing those things, and we'll help you get as much done as you can on your stuff. When you're an adult, you'll know exactly what you want to do and where you can go and go do those things, right?
And how to do it because they saw your example.
Mhm.
Different application, but still the ethic rings true, which is how to be in control of your life. So your son's learning that message when he's old enough to take over. He'll have those same tools to apply to falconry or to wherever he wants to do. It's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that and the other thing too is like, kids' desires change from week to week.
Also,
So we don't change our whole life based on
for falconry.
Yeah. So falconry is one of those things. He's wanted to be a falconer since he was 3. I don't think it's going to change. He will probably absolutely be a falconer at some point in his life. It's probably just going to be later.
Yeah, my dad went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and they're the Falcons. And so for years we would go. In fact, we started doing it again when I was an adult. But we'd go to one game every year when either Air Force would play Army or Navy. We'd go to Colorado Springs, and at halftime they always did a falconry show, and it's like literally one of my favorite things. They have this falcon go around. They send these things up in the air, and it grabs them, and it does this like swoop around the crowd. It's amazing. So I think that's super cool.
Well, one of the cool things about the Air Force, and actually all airports, and it's something that I've learned from my son because he's into this stuff, is abatement, which is keeping birds off of the runways and whatnot.
Right.
Is generally the job of a falconer, because when you use traps and you use poisons and you use anything else, you're generally you're having a negative impact on the environment,
right,
and the ecosystem and whatnot. Where a falcon is a natural part of the environment, you're just directing their actions to keep the birds away from the.
That's amazing. I never knew. That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's like, and it's a huge responsibility too, because like a single goose on the Air Force Base
can derail.
It's like we were talking to the falconer who was, and it's like one of the things, like he's interested in falconry, so we find falconers and talk to them and talk about their jobs and what they do, and it's like just because he can't be one yet,
he's learning.
We're following our things, he's still learning about it. But like a goose basically got through and hit one of the engines on one of the F-22s, and they lost that plane. That plane went down.
Wow.
Right. It's a $1 billion mistake kind of thing.
Oh yeah, my dad was a fighter pilot, and his jets were one engine.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if a goose going through one engine and you're done. It's like
you're done. I was like, the pilot survived, but the plane went down, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, no, I get it.
So,
wow, that is super cool.
They're like falconers are an important aspect of the entire airplane.
Oh yeah, that's
which
super
you don't know until you know.
Until just now. That's very cool. Super cool.
So I want to talk about the flip side of your superpower, right? So we talked a little bit about empathy being your superpower. And humor and low key and that kind of stuff. But the flip side of that is, just like every Superman has kryptonite, or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. It's a flaw that's held you back in growing your business, something you struggled with. For me, I struggled with a lot of things. I struggled with perfectionism for a long time, which kept me from actually like shipping product, because I always make it a little bit better, right? Or the service or whatever. And I also struggled with lack of self-care, which we've been talking about a little bit, but it showed up in a lot of things that I was, the way I was treating my body. And I once tried seeing if I could not sleep for 3 days. That didn't work well. Just in case you're wondering, that leads to vomiting and sickness. Got it.
Not surprised.
And it also showed up in the lack of self-care and not having good boundaries with your clients, and like letting them just walk all over you and those kind of things. But I think more important than what the flaw was is how have you worked to overcome it, so our audience could maybe learn a little bit from your story.
If it's particular to growing my business, I would say my flaw is that I am resistant, is a good word, to promotion and marketing. I think to the cost of my growth. So I don't like those things. I actually hate them, and I have like a visceral response to, like, I quit all social media in 2018. Like there's certain things I've done that are like, coaches that I've worked with business, will be like, you got to be on social media. I'm like, I'm on 0. And they're like, I don't know how to help you, And so, but it's like, I'm weighing this against my quality of life, which is so much better after quitting social media. So I'm sort of in this weird place, but it's definitely a resistance to my detriment. Regardless of social media, it's just about marketing this thing or getting out there in that way. I don't know if it's a confidence issue. I told one coach once, I said, I have a crisis of confidence, because they were like, you are undercharging for what you do. And it was like, so this is how I got over this. I just put my faith in them. they were like, you're way undercharging. And I was like, I don't think clients are going to pay this much. They're like, listen, charge that much. And I did. And I've gotten more clients after that. It was the most amazing thing. I was like, okay, I'll just charge that much, but I'll show you guys are going to be wrong. And they were 100% right. And it was like when people paid enough, they're better clients, they're taking job more seriously, they're getting more gains as a result of that. And it was like, whoa. So part of it was just like, I know what I don't know. And I trust that people know more things than I do. And so I put my trust in them. They're not always right, but at least I know I don't know. And by the way, that's the same ethic I use as a musician. I had a band. People go, you play all the instruments? I go, no, good Lord. I found people who play better than I did. That's the whole point. I would guide the band and I did the songwriting, but I found amazing musicians who did it way better than I could ever do. And I trusted in them. And if they didn't work for it, they wouldn't be in the band. And it was sort of like this idea now. I find people who are stronger at what they do than I am, and I want to work with them. Those are the people that I want to work with. So I think that's a very good strength to kind of get over. Know what your weakness is, know what your flaws are, and find people who are better at it than you are and go to them for guidance in that regard.
Yeah. I'm essentially a professional marketer. That's what we do, is we do marketing. And the charging more, that's falls under the umbrella of something called price elasticity. And the one of my favorite stories from my business with price elasticity, we were selling supplements for a long time on Amazon. We sold a metric crap ton of them. But we had a probiotic that I was testing the price on, and we had it set for $24, I think, was what the bottle cost. And we started testing the price elasticity, which is essentially, can you raise the price or lower the price without impacting the sales volume? And so I started just playing with it and raised it from $24 to $25, no impact on sales. $25 to $26, no impact on sales. $26 to $27, no impact on sales. I got all the way to $35. And when it went from $34 to $35, our sales tripled overnight.
See, it's amazing. This is what the one gain. I mean, I spent a lot of money on this marketing team a couple years ago, and that was the one thing that I paid back the entire money that I invested in them, because they raised my price. They were like, you are way undercharging. And unbelievable. I never would a million years. I was like, there's no way anybody's going to pay this. That's just my brain. It was like, no way anybody's going to pay this. And I was like, people aren't going to like put this on a credit card if they don't have the money. And yet I was doing that exact thing with the marketing team. I didn't have the money to hire them. I charged it. And I did that because I knew I had to invest in that thing to help me. And so my clients are doing the same thing. They know, they see it, that is an investment in their own health and happiness, and they get the reward and the return on it, but it was like this, I couldn't see it. And then that's why I had them to be like, just do what I tell you.
It's funny because I had literally the same discussion with a marketing company. It was probably 2017, so it was a number of years ago, and I was doing the same thing in my business. It was earlier than that, because it was 2012, 13. Yeah, it would have been 2013 timeframe. And I was working with a guy. This back when like Periscope had just come out, and he had this huge audience of people. And like one of the things I did was I helped people write webinars and sell their products and services through webinars. And we still do that, and we've sold millions of dollars of product on webinars. But this was like one of the first big ones that I ever worked with. And he's like, how much would you charge to help me write and deliver and do all the back end stuff of this webinar? I was like, $500, right? And I wrote his webinar for him, and I helped him perform the webinar, and we did all the back end stuff for it. And in 6 weeks, I made him $250,000.
My God. $500.
Yeah, for $500. He got a really good deal out of it. He gave me a good rate review, which is fine. But I like the very next day I went out and I hired a coach, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? And he was like, you're not charging enough. And so the very next client, I 10x'd my price, and not only were they happy to pay it, but we made them, and it was one of those things that it's like that client, my first client, I actually charged what I was worth for. Like, we're still friends to this day. Like, he invited me out of his house a couple of weeks ago, and and considers like the work that we did together like the turning point in his business, right? Whereas like the guy that I made $250,000 to, I heard from that one time and never heard from him again, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's a psychological thing. I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but it is something about that. Then when people, if they spend the money, they are more invested in the process. I mean, I've had better clients after raising my prices, and it's not like they're all wealthy people. They just are like, this is worth it for me. I need to just do this because I've done all these. They've probably spent way more than what they spent on me over the years of doing yo-yo diets, right? So they can kind of go like, okay, I'm just going to spend this one time. And then I can actually make it happen, And so it's worth it.
I like the term yo-yo diets. That cracks me up.
That's what it is. That's not, I didn't make
You
that
go
up.
and you come back,
It is.
you go, you
It's
come back.
up
I
and
get
down,
it. Like
up and down. I
up
mean,
and down.
every client I've ever had, every 100% of clients, I go, so what's your history? And they go, well, I lost weight and I gained it, lost weight, I gained it back, I lost weight, I gained it back. And it's what it is. And eventually they exhaust and then they get the real work done. How long it takes them to get to that age is up to them. But that's my client. That's my clientele.
So speaking of your clients, I want to talk a little bit about common enemy that you're constantly having to fight against. And I probably know the answer to this based on where we were going, but I'm going to ask you anyways. You know, every superhero has an arch nemesis, right? It's a thing that they constantly have to fight against in their world. And what we want to put it in the context of your clients, and it's a mindset or it's a flaw that you're constantly having to fight to overcome when they sign on the dotted line, right? So you can actually get them the result that they came to you for. If you had a magic wand and you could just, you know, bop your clients on the head and not have to deal with that common enemy, what would that be?
Diets.
It's like the yo-yo diets, right?
Diets. That is it. Quick fixes in general, but specifically diets. All my clients come with something about food and weight loss, and I'll be honest, it pisses them off that I go, okay, good, great, we'll talk about that in 5 weeks. What? We'll talk about it in 5 weeks. What about? Like, we're not talking about it yet. We're not talking about it yet. We're not talking about it yet. So if I could just get rid of all diets, it would be great. I'd be a millionaire. But in the meantime, they spend the money on those things, they fail, and then eventually they come to me, and it's what it is, or whomever actually talks about it in an intelligent, long-term way. But yeah, it would be diets for sure. That's what I'm battling against all the time. That quick fix excitement, that body first, mind never. I'm mind first, body second. My before and after photos of clients would be a little bit stressed in the face and a little bit lighter in the face. It's not 100 pounds in 10 weeks. It's real, because after the 12 weeks they work with me, then they continue this work and they get the physical gains that they wanted, but they keep them. So they don't, some of the clients lose weight during my 12 weeks with me, but not because I'm telling them to. It's just their mindset's changing around food. They're relating to food different. They start losing weight, but they're learning the system that goes on way past when they're working with me. So it's very cool to watch.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing too, because diets are, like, I don't know the right metaphor for this, but it's like the caboose on the train kind of thing. It's like the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything else has to be right first.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're like, they're trying to drive the train with the caboose.
That's right. They go that first, and it's like, no, that's later. All the other things, and it's because that excitement and that quick physical gain that they get hits that dopamine excitement. And like I said, people at work go, oh my God, you look amazing. What have you done? Oh my God. It just takes over all the applause. It's so fantastic. And then the shame of gaining it back, and nobody says anything, but they know, and that weight, and it just, it's exhausting. I always say, like, let's remove the figurative weight off your shoulders, and then the literal weight comes off your body. Let's get rid of that stuff that's been weighing you down. I call it, in my book, 6 Truths, I call it the should cloud. I should eat better. I should do this.
People are shooting all over you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's start doing things in multiple areas in very small ways. So at least you're acting every day. Then the should cloud goes away, and now you get control over your life, like what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I call those micro completions. It's probably what you consider small steps,
yep,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, micro completions. It's a habit of action.
Mm-hmm.
It's a habit of doing. And when those things seem too small, raise them. Increase them a ton. Increase them a ton. My small step for people is not a certain amount in the world. It's how they perceive an action to be. If they think it's for them a small step, it can be way bigger than what your small step might be. But for them, it's a small step, and they will keep them doing it because they go, oh, that's no big deal. And as long as they're saying, that's no big deal, they keep moving. As soon as they go, oh man, that's such a big thing, we stop.
Yeah.
Exhausting.
It's interesting. So, like, one of the things that popped in my head when you were saying that, like, small steps when it comes to food, and this goes back to, like, I mentioned earlier, like, my wife and I learned to cook, right? And so, like, one of the things I used to do all the time, and I still do occasionally, is, like, you're hungry and you want to go grab a snack, you grab some crackers, right? And those are boxed prepackaged things with salt all over them, right? And they're great, and they hit the little spot, but it's not terribly good for you,
right?
So, like, one of the things my coach mentioned, he was like, just one thing, just replace crackers with nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, but I don't like nuts. And so like, one of the things I started doing with my kids is we'd buy baked walnuts, or not baked walnuts. We'd buy raw walnuts. Because I like walnuts, and they're a really, like, neutral palate, like, from a flavor standpoint.
Sure.
And if you take a bucket full of walnuts and you take it, like, just a a shot glass full of avocado oil and pour it over the nuts, then you can basically just, you salt them till they taste good, and then you can just go to the spice cabinet and pull out whatever flavors you want and start mixing them in.
Cool.
You bake them for like 10 minutes and you can get whatever
Little
flavors
roasty.
you want. So like I started teaching my kids about like flavor things. I was like, okay, so we're gonna make this set of walnuts, and we're gonna do, you know, taco spices on them, or we're gonna do, you know, this spices on them, or we're gonna do Mediterranean spices on them, or do whatever. Because so it's like it's fun thing to do together, and you get to like test like different flavor profiles and see how they go. But you've also made yourself a cool snack that like now I will regularly go to the cabinet and pull out a, you know, our this week's bag of our our walnuts.
Well, those flavors, exactly.
Yeah, and a handful of walnuts that you've made yourself that taste delicious is significantly better for you.
Yeah, than crackers, absolutely.
Crackers.
And you're in charge of the salt content on it and everything else that the crackers are, you know, doing for you, and God knows what else they've, you know, how much.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things too that I learned really quickly is that like first off, your body requires salt. Like your heart stops beating if you don't have enough of it. Like it's an essential.
It's electrolyte. Yeah.
But all of the boxed foods and everything that we buy are so over salted that we're generally getting significantly more salt than you want.
That's right.
And because we have very little processed food in our diet, we have to salt all of our food.
Yeah. Well,
right?
you do, but you do know that there's sodium occurs in almost every single plant. Like celery is actually a significant sodium source, so you don't need a lot of extra salt to make up the salt that the human body. You know, we didn't always evolve on salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't need that much.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of it,
Yeah.
for sure. But I've just noticed is like when you salt your nuts or you salt your meat or something like that, you don't get the whole, I don't know what you call it. You can tell when you eat a lot of processed food because your skin feels tight.
Oh yeah, and that's the whole thing of like people drinking water all day. Well, when you eat a healthy diet, you don't even need to drink that much water.
Yeah,
you know, the reason why we have the standard American diet, why people should drink water all the time, is because the amount of salt
they're oversalted.
Yeah, they're dehydrated like nobody's business. You know, and so
and like you can tell, I can tell now, like I said, when we go visit friends or something like that, and they have all the processed foods that they make for dinner and whatnot, that like you can feel your skin tight.
Yeah, no,
like,
it literally sucks you dry. Yeah,
you're like oh, it feels weird, but it's one of those things that like if you live that way all the time, you don't notice, and once you sort of become aware, you notice those things really quickly.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so cool.
So,
very cool.
Well, I've only got a couple more questions for you. I want to talk about the flip side of your common enemy, which is your driving force. All right, so just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, what is it you fight for in your business, your mission, so to speak?
True health and strength of the human species. Yeah, true health and strength, true health and happiness, if I had to just say it like that. True health and happiness, which involves being strong in our minds and bodies. But yeah, that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for real, substantial health and happiness, not magazine, quick fix stuff. So that is my
I think it's
goal.
interesting that you mentioned strength. It almost, you said it's probably happiness, but if you're Freudian slip, strength kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I've learned is strength actually looks different than it's presented to us, if that makes sense.
I completely believe that. Even physical strength
that's like exactly my point. Like you look at like people that are like this is what a strong man looks like, and you realize that like that's not actually what a strong man looks like.
No, in the human body, the strongest people I've ever seen are quite slim.
Yeah.
And they're killing it. I mean, this guy, Tim Sheaf, who's a parkour world champion in 2011, probably one of the strongest guys I've ever seen. He's not walking around like this. He's cut. He's obviously strong, but what this guy can do with his body is insane. Conor McGregor, same thing. Conor, mixed martial arts fighter, when he was at the top of his game, crazy athleticism, not a huge buff dude. So yeah, human strength, but mental strength, it's all kind of in that same thing. What does mental strength look like? Does it look like machismo and just digging your heels in and being stubborn? Or does it look like independent thought? Does it look like being able to change your mind?
Like being able to question things.
That's right.
Does it change the way that you...
That's right. That's right. I talk about strength a lot in my new book, Six Truths, because that book's like all about happiness, and strength is a through line in that entire book, because it's like everyone's super sensitive now, but a little sensitivity is a good thing too. Not being, not just going like, no, man. I mean, look at the picture of the macho, strong dude, big beer belly, can't even move, high pressure, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. How did that get the picture of what a strong man looks like? I mean, it's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's interesting too, because like we're having this, you know, sort of global discussion around toxic masculinity, whatever the crap that is.
Yeah.
And you realize that like the for lack of a better term, real men are not toxic.
Correct. I know, right? It's like,
Right. Like masculinity is not toxic. Those are
no.
that's an anathema. It's like they're a contradiction in terms.
Yes, that's I completely agree. And we've gotten so deep in the rabbit hole about like, why do we even, let's talk about basic values and not even put them under femininity or masculinity. Let's talk about strength of character. Let's talk about honor. Let's talk about dignity. Let's talk about honesty. Let's talk about transparency. Let's talk about kindness and compassion, and make those, you help people embody those values, and then don't worry about the whole label thing and the social. That's why I got off social media, because it wasn't a real discussion about anything. It was just the name calling and all this kind of rabbit hole clickbaity kind of stuff. And it was like, no, let's go. My bachelor's degree is in philosophy, you know.
Yeah.
Again, I already started out, there was only 7 of us at graduation, you know, not really, but it's like, you know, this little like thing, and it's just not out there enough. I wish people were.
It's one of the things, like I'm on social media because of the business I do, but like I refuse to engage in most of the posts around discussion or politics and religion and all the other stuff that's going on now, because there's no mind changing that's happening there.
No,
right? No. I was like, if you want to change someone's mind, take them out for coffee.
That's exactly. And it's like, you know, like social. It's in
like have a real interaction with someone.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you know, that's the conversation we're missing. You know, we're missing that kind of like, you know, I remember in college, like going out to a diner, an all-night diner, and just talking about ideas, you know, and it's like, we kids don't do that anymore. You know, I know I'm sounding like an old dude, but TikTok and these kind of bursts of little Snapchatty things are not substantial, and they're fun. But if there's no other side of that, which is real conversation, real discussions about ideas, we're lost as a species. You know, we're not changing our minds. We're not looking at the other side of things. We're making assumptions about people. We're not giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting. Like I got a good friend of mine who, you know, is very into the social media thing. And, you know, she's upset about current political things, and she'll say things on social media about these things. And she's like, if you believe this way, we're not friends anymore. And I'll talk to her and be like, it's like, you realize like I believe those things. She's like, yeah, but you're different. And I'm like, but am I?
Yeah. No, I know. If we all went to, I feel like most people that I probably disagree with politically, I would probably love to go hang out and have a beer with.
Yeah. I was like, we're good friends.
Yeah.
And
it's like,
and she'll be like, I was like, your belief that like the people who believe that way are, you know, assholes or whatever the thing is that you believe, I was like, is fed to you by social media. It's not real.
No, and social media's job, because it's all for free, is to keep you on their platforms as much as possible. So they're going to manipulate information, and they're going to manipulate the way things are framed to make you more engaged in their platform. And I've said this a bunch in my podcast, my new one, What Sid Thinks, newish, is that you get what you pay for. We're at fault because we wanted everything for free. Charge everybody $50 a month to be on Facebook and see how many people stay on Facebook. You know, it's like, we want it for free. So Facebook goes, okay, we got to make billions of dollars. Let's start manipulating headlines and make them look more negative so people engage. And that's what the model is. Get out of it. Doesn't serve anybody, or limit it. I'll put it that way. But one of my truths in 6 truths is social media ain't social. You know what it is.
It's antisocial.
Yeah.
Like,
know what it is, so that you can live your life in spite of it. Know what it is. It's not social. It's not real. It's not human interaction like we're having here. We can have a discussion about stuff. That's not what that is, you know. So,
and we can even disagree, right? And I've had plenty of people on my podcast that are on the complete opposite spectrum for different things, and we can talk about it. And that's the fun part, because that's like real human interaction.
That's I mean, I haven't disagreed with 100% of the things you've said today. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways,
they're all terrible,
and you're a bad person because of it. Anyways. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So I want to talk about something real practical, just for the last sort of section here. And just like every superhero has their tool belt, right? Like their awesome gadgets, like their batarangs or their web slingers, or, you know, their big magical hammer. I'm talking about the top 1 or maybe 2 tools you use in your business that you couldn't live without, right? It could be anything from your notepad to your calendar to something you use for marketing to your product delivery or your coaching. Something you think is essential to getting your job done on a daily basis with your clients. What would you say one of your top tools is?
Can I use one of the tools I use with my clients, or does it have to be like in a, okay. So my number 1 core, right. This is the first writing assignment I do with every client. Okay. And that it's called the ideal idea. And it is this: Imagine that you do not have any idea about what you're actually doing in your life, in the world. And I walk, you have like a blanket over your head and you have no idea what the reality of your life is. And I walk by and I go, hey, Richard, you are living your ideal life. I mean, like the ideal life, you're living it right now. You write that down in present tense. So I've had obese clients write, I'm at a healthy weight. I do not binge. I live in, New York in a brownstone. I travel the world in a RV. I travel with, I see friends 7 days a week. I own my own law firm, all these things that have come up, but they write it as if it's happening now. So when the blanket figuratively comes on, when the figurative blanket comes off, obviously they're going to see where the conflicts exist, where they write, I'm at a healthy weight, but when the blanket comes off, they realize, and they already know, but you know what I mean? In the exercise, they go, oh my God, I'm obese. So they don't see it as anymore like, oh, I'm obese, I'm a bad person. They see, oh, this is in conflict with my ideals. This is in conflict, right? The real person. So it removes this good or bad crap that weighs us down and starts seeing where are the conflicts that exist. Some of the things I wrote in my ideal idea, I'm doing. Don't need to work those. You might write down, I'm traveling the country with my family in an RV. Well, when your blanket comes off, you go, don't need to adjust that. That's happening. But there's other things that might be on your ideal that are not happening or that are not happening enough. And that gives you a direction. That's why it's mind first, body second with me. I want people to be super. And by the way, this seems like an easy assignment. Sometimes it takes weeks for people to get this down because the truth is they do know that they're over. I had a client one time and she goes, in her ideal, she wrote down, I'm on minimal medication. I go, your ideal is that you're on minimal medication? Wouldn't your ideal be maybe that you're on zero medication? But it was very hard for her to sort of wrap her brain around this idea. We feel bad about putting it out there because there might be a reality where you have to be on some medications. So it's like, no, you got to put that on there. You may never achieve it, but it's a direction. It's a place for you to start moving. And when you begin the movement of it, you're a happier person right out of the chute because you're moving, you're taking control of your life. You're moving in that direction. The goal becomes less important over time, but what direction are you moving in? So that's the number one thing I would leave your listeners with is on paper, what are your ideals? What do you stand for? What is your perfect life look like? And that will keep you from going on a diet because I've never had a single client say, I lose weight and gain it back in their ideal. Never. They always go, they always go, I'm at a healthy weight. I don't think about food very much. If you know that is what you stand for, maybe it's not, but if it is, you'll never go on another diet again because that won't get you closer to your goal. That will help you dictate what your actions are right out of the chute on day one.
It reminds me of, I just read Psycho-Cybernetics. I can't remember the guy who wrote that book, but anyways, the Psycho-Cybernetics, he talks about humans are like, we are at our best when we are going somewhere.
Right?
Like we have a journey. Like if we're not going on a journey, like we can't do anything. And he was like, the first part of going on a journey is creating your identity.
That's right.
Right. And as a lot of people, we just have whatever identity that we've sort of developed over our life. We never
what people have told us.
Yeah, or told us. We never actually like developed our own. And it sounds like that exercise is you're helping people to define their identity.
That's 100% correct.
And then strive towards it.
That's exactly right. The last truth of my new book is called Happiness is in the A to Y, not in the Z. It's in the A to Y. It's in I said, as soon as you reach a goal, oh my God, that's so great. I reached the goal. Next day, start a new goal because that's where the happiness is. It isn't finishing the race. That's amazing. That's a great day. That's excitement. But happiness is in the training for the next race. And that's where we get locked up because we think it's in the result.
It's one of the things that I love the most about traveling. And so my business now is about 13 years old. And for the first 7 years, I was at home, in one spot, which is, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago, we started traveling.
Right.
And in the last 5 years, I have grown my business probably six times since what I did in the first 7 years. Wow. Right. So like, and people ask me all the time, like, do you think traveling has something to do with that? And I don't quite know if the answer to this, what the answer to that is yet, because I'm still thinking about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've noticed is that because we're always in motion, that motion translates into a lot of other things.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. Like that I'm in motion in my business. I'm in motion with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for me to get comfortable in a routine.
Huh. That keeps things fresh and alive.
It does. And it's interesting. So, and so what I've been trying to figure out is like traveling can't be the answer to that.
Yeah.
Because not everyone can travel like that. And also there are plenty of people who are incredibly successful with their businesses who don't travel.
Right.
So I'm like, so it's not the reason, but it is an impetus in my life. So I'm like, how do you, and I think part of it is just because we have a relentless focus on motion. And that
Super
just sort
cool.
of spills out into other things, right? Because you realize it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And one of the things that like I've sort of realized in my own business was I for a long time was striving for getting to a particular destination or a particular goal. And there's nothing wrong with that, like having a goal or whatever, but if you're not enjoying the process, like the actual journey portion of getting to those goals, then it's very difficult to actually make any progress towards them.
That's super interesting. And I think the difference is that if I go on vacation, I want to go to Scotland and I can't wait to get to Scotland. But because you're sort of in a perpetual travel mode, you've trained your brain that it's less about the destination. You've created this sort of metaphor of a good life in the sense that you're like, we're in a traveling mode now. This is what we do. And so because of that, you're almost forced in a good way to notice the journey along the way to Santa Fe, you know? And so that's pretty incredible. If you can, this is what I struggle with too, because I'm like, if I could just get my, get out of there and really say, this is a really cool place. Let me develop this and actually be mindful of the travel along the way. It can only be a good thing. That's very cool.
Yeah. And it's an interesting, like I said, I haven't quite got that solidified into like, here, I could teach someone else this mindset yet, but it's like it's the thing I'm discussing with myself and with people on the podcast, obviously.
Super interesting.
But it's that whole idea that like, I'm in a place wherever it's at, but I don't have a destination.
Yeah.
I mean, the destination is like, we're traveling.
Yeah.
And we're enjoying the journey.
That's right.
And so I'm learning to enjoy the process of like, I have to find a new grocery store here, right? I don't know the grocery store. I have to find it and then figure out where all the stuff that we want to buy is in it, right? And figure out which restaurant we want to go to and who we're going to hang out with this evening, which means like, I have to go and knock on someone's door and be like, hey, I noticed you got a bunch of kids bikes in your front. We got kids that are the same age. You want to go have dinner together?
I have an idea for you.
What's that?
You call it the traveler's mindset. You help people develop the traveler's mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm giving that to you. That's pretty cool, because if you I'm helping you develop the traveler's mindset, it doesn't have to be that you have to travel. But if you have the traveler's mindset, if you're training your clients to embody this idea of being in motion, even if they're living in one destination, but in their business being in motion, always being in motion in some way, it's very cool. I like what you're doing. This is interesting. It's like a whole other podcast.
Just to move it into like my business, one of the things that I've noticed has been like building the systems and processes that run the business it's not a thing that ever is done. Right. There's no destination for it. Like, hey, you've got this process done and this process done. They're always growing and changing. And so it's a difficult thing to get finished with. And one of the things that I've sort of learned to do is really enjoy that process. Right. Which I didn't earlier in my career. Now I do. And part of it is because I realized like there isn't a destination here. No. It's just progress.
It's so funny because I've gotten better at that. it's a struggle, but I've likened my small steppers practice with clients to yoga, because I said, have you ever known a yoga instructor who goes, I'm done. I know everything. No, yoga instructors take courses. They take their own classes. They're teaching, but also taking classes. It's a practice. Yeah. And if you can apply that to in all things in your life, that it's a process and a practice, you're a happier person for it, by the way, healthier and all those kinds of things that come along with that. And it's very cool. The traveler's mindset. I'm digging that.
Yeah, me too. I think we've got the coolest thing out of the podcast so far. Is
the traveler's mindset. That's
because like I said, just to tie that back into what we were talking about is the whole identity thing. Is you're setting up someone to essentially set them up for having a traveler's mindset, that you're like, this is where I want to go. I want to go to this place.
That sets you in motion. The ideal idea sets them in motion. It sets them in. That's the whole idea. They keep that thing. It's a living document. They are referring to it. They're editing it. They learn new things. They go back and change that. And they go, I don't want to be a famous rock star. I thought I did, but I don't. I want to be a novelist. And they go back. I'm a best-selling novelist. And they've never written a word in their lives. But then they get to small step into writing, and they start writing 3 sentences a day and all these kinds of things. Movement, constant traveling.
It's movement.
Very cool.
It's movement. And I remember like one of the things that I wrote down, because I did something similar. I wrote a perfect day. Right.
Okay, there you go. It's funny.
It was
So
like
this is not a joke. My current one now with clients is ideal idea, but then on the second page it says the ideal day. Not even kidding.
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's already happened. It's been happening the last 6 months. I was like, you know what? I want to do the ideal day too, so they can kind of see where that formulates to. Anyway,
and
go ahead.
so like I wrote the ideal day, like what my ideal day looked like, and it's changed a lot. And over the course of years of like what my ideal day would look like, because it's exactly what you're talking about, is you get things and you're like, oh, I don't actually care about that.
That's right.
Right.
Knowledge.
and part of it is because you think you have things that you want to do, and then you realize like I don't really care. Like one of them, like I think on my ideal day when I wrote it initially, it was like I wanted to drive a specific type of car. And I realized over the course of like living that I just don't give a damn.
Yeah.
And you realize that the thing that I wanted was I wanted to have a specific freedom of motion.
That's right.
That I thought the particular car would give me, and it wasn't the car, right? It was something different.
Bigger picture.
But it's not something that you figure out until you're in motion, right? You
That's
have to be in motion to learn those things.
These things are revealed when you're doing things. You know, it's one of my, not to like talk about this book, but my new book is about all this stuff. But one of the truths is know what you give a crap about. Because if you don't apply thought to that, you get swept up into some stupid office politics or some idea of a BMW, and that's not actually what you want. You know, and you know, only in being engaged in your life do you find those things out. Once my clients start moving, then all this stuff comes flooding in, and that's why we take it slow to, you know, awareness-based habit change. Give them space around what they're doing, not flooding with a diet where they have to measure something out at 10:30 in the morning. Giving them minimal things to do so that their motion begins, and then awareness of how they're feeling and information comes in. It's the coolest thing. Same idea.
Yeah.
Traveler's mindset.
And it's interesting that it's like I actually started with that sort of ideal day stuff, and I ended up with a health coach because that's where it led me.
Interesting.
Like it was like I wanted to get to a point where I didn't have to care about food and fitness and other things because it was just how my life worked.
Yep.
And I realized I didn't know enough about I didn't know how my body worked well enough to do that.
Right.
And so it led me to getting a health coach.
Wow. Super. Wait, the turns we take, right? How cool.
Yeah.
How cool.
So
right on.
That's cool. And I love that. I love that as a tool. If you're listening and you have never done that exercise of writing out a perfect day or an ideal thing, I can look back at that as being one of the changing points in the trajectory of my life and really getting to where I wanted to go. So
it grounds people. Yeah, I do too. My clients, it's the first thing, period. People in my online program right now, one of them has already gone through it, but she did it a few years ago. Now she's doing it again. And she just wrote me an email. She's like, I'm just redoing that thing because they get a little off and they're back into it and they're reformulating that ideal idea, seeing where it is now. Cool.
Absolutely.
And now, a quick word from our show's sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show.
So I got one more question for you here before we wrap things up, and it's about your guiding principles. Right, one of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. Right, for instance, Batman never kills his enemies; he only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up, I'm going to talk about the top 1, maybe 2 principles that you use regularly in your life.
Integrity, and living the example. Working to live. Always having that in the back of my mind, both as a parent, but as a practitioner and as a husband, having strength of character and integrity and living the example. It's not about what I'm saying so much as what I'm doing. And if people can disagree with me, but I want them to go like, well, he's doing it, and so that's the most important thing for me is living the example. That would be my guiding principle.
So this might be one of those things that's fascinating just to know on the other end of the interview is we're at roughly 225 interviews or something like this, entrepreneurs from like every walk of life, everything from Fortune 500 companies to coffee shop owners in the Philippines to health coaches like yourself. I ask that question on almost every interview, and the number one answer by a humongous margin, like 96% of people that I have on here, they answer integrity.
Oh,
which is interesting to me because one of the reasons I started the podcast is like we have culturally this idea that entrepreneurs are the villains, right? And like you can't turn on a kids TV show without the villain being some version of entrepreneur pours oil on ducks for money.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
because there are those people.
Yeah, there are those people. They exist, and it's like actually one of my good friends and I, we have a theory about why that is, because it's an anathema, right? It's not normal, so it makes a good story.
Yep. Social media. There you go. Yeah.
Right. So it makes a good story, which is why it's always the story. The story is always entrepreneur is bad guy, and the problem is culturally is people like yourself and myself and a lot of people who are entrepreneurs. We look at our business in a negative light because we have this misconception that entrepreneurs are villains.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at what entrepreneurs are doing, they're looking at making a positive impact and positive change. And they pretty much always universally hold integrity as one of the highest principles that they live their life by and run their business by. And I just find that interesting.
It's very interesting. Very interesting because it is not what, and we're out there, but we just don't make the headlines.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you mentioned earlier, you're never going to be huge, right?
No, and I was pissed about that for a long time. Like I always, when I was a musician, I was like, why can't I make platinum records? It's like, that's not what I do. I had integrity as a musician too. I wasn't trying to write a hit, and so you either like me or you don't like me, but I was able to stand behind my music and I'm able to stand behind my work, and it makes me a happier person for it.
And one of the things that has really changed my impact or changed my view of like the way that I impact the world is that like, if you look at it's that starfish story. If you've ever heard that starfish story where there's a little boy is on the beach and there's an old man on the beach and he's going down the old man is walking down the beach. He sees a little boy. He's tossing starfish back out into the ocean, and there's just thousands and thousands of those starfish because they all got washed up on the shore for something. And he's just tossing a starfish back out into the ocean. And the old man's like, "What? Why are you doing that? Like, you're not going to make a difference. Like, there's a lot of these starfish are going to die." And the little boy bends down, he picks up another starfish, and he tosses it back in the ocean. He goes, "It makes a difference to that one."
Yeah.
He picks up another starfish, and he tosses it in the ocean. Made a difference to that one.
Yeah.
And it's just that idea that like I may not be the kind of person who's going to like impact the world by like an Oprah Winfrey or the Eagles or something like that, right? But the people that I do work with, I impact their lives and change the trajectory dramatically, right? Like I'll forever be a part of their story.
That's right. And they influence as a result of your work. It does bleed into other. It bleeds into the relation. Me as a health coach, like I know I positively affected relationships. I know that I positively affected marriages because in helping a wife maintain her stress and be a happier person, the husband's happier for it. They might go like,
"What better?" And
the kids are happier. The household is more positive. Or I'm helping a husband the same way. It doesn't matter what, what I'm saying. And it's like, it does affect the world. Just not, I know, not in a massive way, but it does. It bleeds out. It's
what I call the ripple effect.
That's right.
It's the stone you throw in the lake that forever changes the landscape.
That's right. So it goes.
Well, cool. I think that is a great place to wrap our interview. I do finish every interview with something I call the Heroes Challenge, and I do this to help get access to stories I might not otherwise find on my own, because not everyone is out doing the podcast rounds like you or I do. So my question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story with us here on the Hero Show? First person that comes to mind for you.
I would say probably Joan and Jeff. There's two, but they're married. They own the Stanford Inn, and they're an eco resort, and they have been pretty much trailblazers along the way and have suffered in a good way, I think, but the same kinds of fates that we have. Like, they're under the radar. Have a challenge of running a business that they're trying to make it as ethical and sustainable as possible in a real way, not a sort of we're ethical. We're eco, but they're actually on boots on the ground trying to do this right. Definitely not perfect. So yeah, I think it's been, and they've had their business for 42 years, and
That's
it's constantly evolving and growing. This little family run. They have a very like cool. They live on the property. You know, they're not this corporate owned kind of thing, and it's very cool to watch. I'm happy to be a part. I've been living there. I've been working there, not living there, working there for 15 years, 16 years, and it's an evolution and very cool to see.
Yeah, well, I'll see if we can reach out after the show and get an introduction. Maybe we can get them on and say hi. Maybe we can't, but sometimes when we do, we get stories that you just otherwise don't get a chance to hear because they're not out doing the podcast rounds.
Yep, exactly.
So we'll definitely reach out afterwards to see about that. But in comic books, there's always the crowd of people who are cheering and clapping at the end for the acts of heroism. So our analogous to that here on this show is, where can people light up the bat signal, so to speak? Right? Where can they go if they want to get your help? And more importantly than where is, who are the right types of people to raise their hand and say, hey, you know what, Sid, I'd love to speak with you and work with you?
Yeah, well, people who don't want to do the same thing over and over again, they're over it, and they want to do the hard work, but the good work, the best work of taking control of their lives. And you can find me, not on social media, smallsteppers.com, smallstepintensive.com. Smallsteppers.com is my online program. I do live Q&A, so I'm very involved. Small Step Intensive is my private coaching 12-week program, smallstepintensive.com. And then otherwise, SidGarza-Hillman.com, which is my main site. You can get to my YouTube channel through there. You can get to my old podcast, the Approaching the Natural podcast, and the one I've been doing now for 155 episodes, which is called What Sid Thinks. You can go to SidGarza-Hillman.com for all things me.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll take those links and make sure that they're in the show notes for this episode. Cool. And Sid, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. I have enjoyed our conversation immensely. Do you have any final words of wisdom for my audience before I hit this stop record button?
No, I just want to thank you for your time. And I know we went over a little time, but I think we had a really cool conversation. I didn't know it was very cool. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.